Hi Lootbags. There is no doubt that the Guild Wars 2 community has really opened its eyes up to the idea that games should be accessible. Look at huge events like the Hardstock Accessibility Challenge, which had the community create low-intensity builds to help players who do not have the ability to click their keyboard 100 times per second for a maximum DPS. As a colorblind person, I absolutely love the idea that the community bands together to create epic resources for everyone to have a better time in-game, no matter what impairments you might be struggling with on a day-to-day basis. One thing stood out to me though, and that has been the large focus from the community on how Guild Wars 2 is not doing enough to be accessible in its own right. While certainly true, then I also think it's important we acknowledge the accessibility things they do right. I have my own struggles in the game, so here are 8 things that actually make Guild Wars 2 more accessible to me. One of the most well-known accessibility features in Guild Wars 2 is the squad markers. You know, those that are placed in important locations by your commander while you're learning a raid. Another super common use for them is to indicate where to place a damage spike in World vs. World. What's accessible about squad markers, you might ask? They don't just have a color, but they have a shape associated with each color. This allows colorblind players like myself to communicate with others about specific markers. I remember when they just came out and most players I was playing with were using their colors to talk about them. Over the years this has changed, and players now talk about them using their shapes instead, allowing everyone to participate in the conversation. A new player joins the chat and that player is called personal targets. You probably already know how you can call a target for your entire party to see so you can easily focus your damage on the same enemy. But did you know that there is a personal target system in the game too? This is exactly what it sounds like, a target you can call that only you can see. This way you can do helpful things like making your commander more visible in World vs. World without disturbing the rest of your party who might not be struggling to see a commander tag. Auto-loot is a huge accessibility feature. Auto-loot allows us as players to focus more on the content we're playing rather than looting. This is important not just because of the increased focus on fighting your enemy, but because there are players out there who might have impairments preventing them from clicking too many buttons at the same time. This results in more focus on actually performing than doing busy work, which should always be welcome in a game. This is the latest accessibility feature in Guild Wars 2 and I have already started using it. It is the cursor contrast setting. With the cursor contrast, you can choose to add a thick black and white border to the cursor in the game, making it a lot more visible. If the black and white border is not enough, there is an even more visible option that adds a circle behind the cursor too. Now, I don't personally have a need for a high contrast cursor all the time, and this is something that Guild Wars 2 thought of. They added a setting to only show the high contrast version while you are holding a button. By default, that button is left alt. For most group content, you will either be in a party or a squad, where knowing the health of your party can be helpful. While it's easy to quickly look at the party and squad UI, then for a lot of players it helps a lot if they can be allowed to simply focus on the battlefield and what is actually going on. Thick squad and party health bars are settings that allow you to enlarge the health bars of squad and party members. They are 2 individual settings allowing you to choose only your party if that's what you so desire. Normally you can't see health above players' heads unless you target or hover them. That's why I recommend also enabling the associated settings always show squad or party health bars if you choose to use thick health bars. In the vein of talking about settings, then why not talk about show all usable object names? By default, you can hold down the control key to see names of interactable objects nearby. Especially during story episodes, there's a tendency of having to find interactable objects, and most of the time these will be borderline invisible for someone like myself. This can help make a tedious and unfun experience more bearable. Before you go, but that's cheating! It's not really. Guild Wars 2 have made sure that the episodes where finding interactable things that are more deeply tied to the story don't actually have nameplates on those objects at all. Post-processing in Guild Wars 2 is either something you love or something you hate. It certainly makes the game more colorful and shiny, so if that's what you're into, everything is good. For myself, I personally really dislike the bloom, which can only be removed by turning off the post-processing. So ArenaNet, can we please have a setting for that? Now, if you're struggling to see what's going on screen, then turning post-processing off helps reduce a lot of the visuals of the game to the point where it can be easier to see important visual effects, like skills. In good clickbait fashion, then I have left the best tip for last. This is by far the most impactful accessibility setting if you don't count in squad markers that I have already mentioned. Chat channel tags is a setting you can toggle on that will start displaying which chat channel a message is in. For a colorblind person like myself, then this is incredibly helpful to quickly identify where a message was sent. To be honest, then it does have a flaw, which is that Say and Squad Chat both have the tag S. With their already similar colors, then these are to this day the most difficult for me to actually distinguish. All the other channels are great though. If you're not colorblind like me but want an easier time in World vs. World, then you should also enable this setting, since it allows you to see which border a message is sent from if someone is writing in team chat. Just because accessibility is usually made with specific groups of players in mind, that doesn't mean you cannot benefit from these changes, even if you don't suffer from any impairments. That's why they are so important and why we should continue to push ArenaNet and other game studios to make games more accessible. Please share your favorite accessibility feature in the comments. I'm Reddish, and this is my invitation for you to join our community over on Discord. You can find a link in the description. Thank you so much for watching.